Hey everyone, CryptoVatsik here with another video for you today. Nothing of what you're about to see is considered financial advice and they're just my opinions. If you enjoy this content, I'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let's jump right into it. Okay, this is just going to be a quick market update on Bitcoin since a lot has developed. So we're going to start off with this chart, which I've shared on my Twitter multiple times over the past few months. And essentially my thesis was that we were going to get a retest of that 20K monthly structure after getting a sweep of the prior high sitting at around just over 25K. So we did in fact do that, broke market structure on the way up. We came back down, tested that liquidity, tested that MSB. We got continuation. We ended up breaking these highs at 25K and then started to consolidate around the 100 EMA. And the target remained at 33K, which is a prior loss structure that we had for many months. This was a many month time frame that got respected on that level, just like the 6K shelf that we had back in 2018 for many months sitting on that shelf. I think it is relatively fair to say it is a similar area that ultimately needs to be reclaimed on a high time frame if we're going to start a bull rally. Now, the other thing I want to note, I'll just drop down to the daily time frame, is essentially an area of consolidation that we had back here in 2022 in May. This is essentially just our next level of interest, or essentially what is our next area of high time frame resistance coming up to this prior high that we had here at around 32K. So essentially what I'm looking for is a test of that prior high, which is the range high of this range consolidation that we had back here in May, with possibly a slight deviation above that level to that 33K mark. And the reason why I'm giving it some more flexibility and ability to deviate above toward 33K is because we've got a pretty significant low back here that formed in January 2022. So essentially there is room for a deviation above that major resistance level. And we'll just make it yellow for now. And especially if this starts to go parabolic, I don't see that being very difficult personally for Bitcoin to do. So essentially just basically this prior range that we had in 2021 is very crucial at this point. We're essentially trading back inside of that range high and that range low. So essentially what is reclaiming that range low and now trading inside of that range again. So we're basically back to 2021 price action or 2021 levels. So the price action is definitely bullish for sure. And I don't think anyone can deny that. When we started to form this range here, we got price starting to compress, basically just chop over the course of this period. And I'll show you another chart quickly about that range. Okay, so this is another chart that I had shared on my Twitter as well. And essentially I just saw basically we were trading within the range low and the range swing high, which gave us really no confidence in the direction it wanted to go. I was leaning towards top, so I was starting to chart technical targets near the top if we were to break out. I think a lot of people were expecting a tap of liquidity before we pushed back up, which would have been completely fair and still would have been healthy. But I had said basically right here was my criteria: hold that range EQ, which we did beautifully on this price action. Final compression on price before we broke to the upside. Reclaim the quarter range, check, done right here. Pressure the range high. Instead of pressuring it and consolidating, we actually just smashed right through it. And then essentially just pushed to 33K thereafter. So this is the technical range target here, basically the width from the high to the low. That is your technical target. But we do have a trend of resistance here. You'll notice this diagonal from all the way back here, these prior highs that we had in January, all the way to this consolidation to this range, and has been respecting it for some time. So it's just something to be wary of. Price may start to stall around that level, around that 30K level or 30 to 31K level. And then perhaps at a macro sense, that's kind of where you want to start looking for your some entries. If you've missed this move, I think if this is going to be as bullish as this move looks to be, then we're going to get very shallow retracements and not a lot of opportunity to get in. But either way, this is my thesis. That's a technical target there at roughly 32K, but I think that we will get some sort of wick or at least a deviation or even push past 33K. Okay, just flipping to another chart quickly. I did share this as well on my Twitter. I basically had said that I wanted to classify this as a reaccumulation range. And basically for it to be classified as a reaccumulation range, I couldn't have this low broken. We needed to stay at least above the range EQ. Possibly I would have accepted one more sweep of these lows into the range's bottom half, but I would want to see to be very brief to reclaim that EQ and then start to break out. And I had said green liquidity zone would have been a perfectly healthy correction. But if this was going to be considered reaccumulation, then I didn't want us to see the break the range low. You notice something really similar on these 3 weekly candles that we had here. So essentially these 3 weekly candles being considered our reaccumulation range on a high time frame on the weekly chart here. So I wanted to see exactly what we're getting now. I wanted to see expansion right after those 3 candles, which is essentially just continuing the trend with a reaccumulation range here for 3 weeks. And you'll notice if we go back to the previous bottom that we had in 2019, we had basically our breakout of original accumulation, expansive move up, and then essentially got 3 weeks of a little bit indecisiveness in the market, wicks to the top, wicks to the bottom, which ended up being our phase of reaccumulation, tightening with that exponential moving average here, the gray line, before getting our next candle up with expansion. And then you'll notice really the key thing here being a reclaim of that 6K level being quite crucial. Actually, in fact, later on did come back down and retest it. But essentially what I'm seeing now is I want to see that reclaim of that 6K shelf. And I am essentially relating that to the 30K shelf here. So 30 to 33K shelf is essentially the new structure that I want to see reclaimed for a larger run. Now, one other thing I want to bring your attention to is this diagonal that I had just covered right here. So this basically this uptrend, taking it from the tops of these candles, either the wicks or the candle bodies, and essentially just following that trend on the way up as we push. I think if we do end up getting that 33K price tag, it probably happens faster than if we were to trade inside of that trend. If we were to trade in here inside the trend and then hit 33K here, still being under that trend, I think that would be fine. But if I'm leaning towards this being truly the bullish move that could possibly be when we're talking back in 2019, then you want to see essentially that diagonal broken. And we'll drop down to the daily. So essentially here's that same or similar price action that we got back in 2019. These are the 3 reaccumulation candles that we got. And we had basically what is an uptrend here as resistance, taken from the highs, taken from the tops, candles of the wicks, until ultimately that was broken and then we traded above that trend line. So it's notable the similarities that we're currently getting between 2019 bottom breakout and now. It doesn't mean the same thing is going to happen exactly. It's just something to note of what it could potentially look like. And important to understand that we have seen it before. So I think it's just important to understand context. Okay, let's drop down to some lower time frame here and try and break this down. If this is as bullish of a move as we think it might be, then I don't want to see a large pullback. I essentially want to see this range high that we've now broken from the prior range that we had. I would prefer to see that range high actually get front ran. If this is building a next leg up to 33K, I want to see us get away from that range high as quickly as possible. Similar to what we saw in 2019. I do not want to see a large wick up and then all of a sudden we come back down and we're trading on top of that range high again with little to no reaction. It would lead me to believe that there is weakness and it's a possible deviation, and then ultimately we would likely just trade back inside of that range. We've had all the criteria within this range for a breakout and push higher. We had our swing high on the range, took out the stops. We had our swing low on the range, took out the stops, scooped up all the liquidity on both sides, reclaimed that range EQ, took out stops, scooped up liquidity, price pinched, broke out of that trend, market structure break, new high, retested the MSB, and a super clean break out of the range high. Okay, one other thing I'm going to cover here is just the logarithmic chart that I've shared in my previous videos, ultimately showing those green accumulation zones in green after our bull cycle and bear cycles, and essentially what is now reclaimed that lower support band of the log curve with a beautiful retest of it right here when we had that wick back in March. We had our deviation outside of that range here. We traded outside of it. We had traded outside of it before in the past as well, briefly. But either way, I think that we have now entered that essentially what is that buy zone overall on a high time frame buy zone if we're headed to all-time highs. Obviously, you want to be buying as lower as possible. However, from a macro sense, I want to see that support band hold is what I covered in previous videos, and we did. So I think it's safe to say that the bottom is in. Something very new and very negative would have to come in, an unforeseen black swan event, I think, for us to come back down to the lows. Everything just seems to be lining up perfectly. And I had said exactly this when we were trading back here in that red box outside of the support band. I wanted us to reclaim and start trading inside here in the overall green buy zone, as well as on the top of that support band. And we got it perfectly, so it's really good to see. And so if you just look over at this box here, so basically similar price action, we had, high time frame reaccumulation in price before the origin of the breakout or the origin of that move came. So I think it'd be perfectly healthy for us to possibly come up to that 33K level, maybe deviate a bit higher, and then start a form of reaccumulation, something similar to what we saw back in 2020 before working on our next leg up towards this prior high at around 47,000. Something like that would make sense to me. Of course, we could just continue to go parabolic. And like I said, if we do end up breaking that trend, we do end up breaking some sort of trend here that we have been following. Then it's just a sign that essentially this is starting to go parabolic, and then it's possibly straight up to that high even quicker than I think. That is possible. I just cover it because everything's possible. But you got to think what's going to leave most people sidelined? What's going to make people FOMO back in the quickest? If we get a large rejection off 33K and we start coming back down like this, people are not going to feel FOMO. They're going to think we're coming back down to the lows. But it would give us pretty good opportunity to get in for longer term positions if we got that. I just don't know if it's going to give us that opportunity. We have broken all the prior highs of the bear market down here since August 2022. So depending on what happens when we come up to that 33K level, we're just over 30K, is going to be very telling, I think, for the longer term time horizon of what to expect. All right, guys, I think that's just a quick update for this video. Hopefully you found something helpful in it. If you did, please give the video a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new. As always, thank you for joining, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.